If I had that's beyond the point. Hello and welcome to Endure Entertainment. I am Goodlow Napier, and I'm here tonight to talk about addiction, alcoholism as a disease, which is something that is it's a hot topic to go through. You know, if you talk to somebody who's a lifelong devotee of, let's say, 12-step program, they're going to disagree with me completely. But I don't look at alcoholism as a disease, and I'm the last person you would think would be actually saying that. Just because I mean, I was a severe alcohol use disorder or alcoholic, whatever you want to call it. And it was every excuse in the book. You know, it was genetically. It was my dad's fault. It was my sister's fault. It was something else. I'm not going to rehash this 1,000 times. But these were convenient excuses for a pity party, more or less. And you know, that's what I did for so many years. Let me fix this extremely close. And sorry, I'm screwed up over here on Facebook. Sorry, I needed everybody to see the Macho Man shirt because that's so very important when it comes to uh, whatever I'm talking about. But anyway, to get right into this, alcoholism is a disease. This was a process that was championed by a guy named E.W. Jelnick and Alcoholics Anonymous itself. And the reason it's termed a disease is because the American Medical Association agreed, yes, that they're going to call it a disease. Now, the thing that people don't understand and can't get a grasp of when I talk about it is the fact that it very much makes economic sense that alcoholism, as it was called, is labeled a disease because that cuts the red tape of the medical billing. And then somebody can be, you know, long-term care. They can, as AA says, keep coming back, and it's very, to me, it's become quite an issue because I know of rehabs, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the same person going back to a rehab, but I know that some people will use that. It's not a rehab; it's a recovery center, and that's just a place to have a room, detox, and free food. In my opinion, a lot of times because of the assessments, and they're not capable of doing a case by case basis. What I mean by that is most people who come in for addiction have some sort of trauma going on in their lives, or has been going on in their lives, and depression, anxieties, etc., etc. And listen, you're taking. I know the last time I went to that worthless place in Nicholasville is my assessment. It was basically, hey, what's your name, your phone number, do you remember your birth date, what's your insurance card, etc., etc. Waste of time. And then they put me out there with probably 25 to 30 guys out in the smoking section. Say, hey, meet these guys. Hope everybody gets along. And then we're going to do a bunch of groups together. And that's all it consisted of, was groups and going to church. Now, me later on, after I started healing from my end-stage liver failure and kidney failure and had no chance of living, I really searched for answers, and that's what got me back into school to work towards a degree. A master's degree in psychology with a concentration on addictions. And I look at it and I'm like, why did this fail me so many times? Why isn't this working? Why did I keep going to these meetings, keep coming back? Why do I need to apologize to people who traumatized me? Why do I need to make amends? Listen, there's a difference in forgiving and also creating yourself more trauma. I got in a discussion with a lady. She's a doctor in psychology. She has been for 30, 40 years now, about the show Intervention. And because I was sitting there myself and I was watching it and I was like, okay, they're putting these people in a room with maybe a father who they haven't spoken to in let's say 5 years or more, and the father is an absentee father and has nothing to do with their lives, and they're putting Uncle Joe over here and your cousin's boyfriend, and everybody's reading you a letter, and it's mostly they're playing a blame and shame game, which anybody in addiction or wanting to get free from addiction, it's an emotional process, because here's the fact is you're actually feeling for once. And I spent years, over 2 decades, hiding from feelings, and that's the truth. That's the absolute truth and the way to look at it. I never thought when I started doing this I would catch so much grief um, for a lot of people like to say I don't know what I'm talking about, but and that education doesn't mean anything, and whatever, as compared to experience. And it's that same argument. Let me tell you, I can tell you all about being addicted to anything. I've got that experience. I've got more than a lot of people do. And that's not something to be proud of, but it's the truth. And, I own that part of it. But I also didn't understand to the level I do now the theories of personality disorders, the different types of therapies. From right now, I'm very big into Gestalt therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's keeping someone in the now instead of. I'll give you a quick example. Somebody could be saying, I've got all this experience, I've got all this education, or I've got all this lifelong experience in building houses and so on and so on. I should have a better job. I should be more adaptable to social situations. I could have done this differently. So, with this type of therapy, you eliminate the should have, could have, and would have. So you take it out of your vocabulary and you focus on the now. What now? What do I look like today as compared to yesterday? And, you can't stay trapped in what they call addiction forever. And I'm a big advocate of saying, again, that it's not a disease. Listen, in the updated stats I went through yesterday, now it's increased, but you've got 12% of the doctors in the United States who believe alcoholism. And I'm going back to calling it alcoholism for bit, and I'll explain that later because they're trying to differentiate in medical terms the difference between alcoholism and alcohol use disorder, where alcoholism would be chronic, and that's purely, I believe, I'm not for sure, for billing purposes. But so that's back on the front. I prefer to use alcohol use disorder um, because the way it's been labeled to us for the last century is that it's incurable. You're always going to stay in recovery, and that's the same model that is used time and time again through every. I've been through rehab 4 or 5 times, and every time it was all about the same thing. And that is part of what got me looking for answers. And granted, man, I had to die to come back to life. And I looked for people to say good job or people to understand and agree what I was talking about. I didn't, I was looking for acceptance, which more or less I wasn't going to get because I decided to take another step and go on another level and actually educate myself about what in the hell was wrong with me. Why do I keep going back to the same pattern? Why? And, I did that and I think about it and I talk about it that I can't put together one solid year in the last 20 years. Now, that used to be what's convenient when you go through these 12 steps. It's not your fault. You can't help it. You don't have a choice. And I will tell you from somebody who nobody in my friends, family, or anything else ever thought that I would get sober. I can absolutely tell you that there is a choice to be made. There is a choice to get help. There is a choice to better yourself. It's scary. And that's the thing. You have to have the guts to do it. I know when I was talking to a doctor this week, I don't want to say her name and just out it because I'm paraphrasing her thoughts and ideas with her doing it so long. That's not cool, man. But in looking back through all of this, I can specifically remember after they told me, and I was told I had 3 days, maybe a couple of weeks at the most to live. And I remember certain people saying, "Am I scared?" I remember other people coming and telling me it's okay. It's okay to go. And still pisses me off. But that's just me being me. So I was not scared of dying, and it's the first time I said, and that don't make me tough. It's the first time I came to a realization that this is my fault. My choices got me here. My choices got me till I had somehow a 0.58 alcohol level, and that's, 3 points above death. And I started really taking responsibility and acceptance. When I started therapy, it was a death and dying therapy. And after going through that and digging into some of what happened in my childhood and other things, that I, by the grace of God, started healing. I had end stage liver. I had end stage, and it is what it is. You hear that, and you're already planning somebody's funeral, which mine was being planned. Thank you for those who planned it. But my biggest fear, and I can say this time and time again because I'm always taking on in my life the fact that I'm not religious enough, and you know what? I'm not religious at all. I think religion is a farce and a buzzword. Um, I am a man of faith and a man of being very grateful to be here today. And I can remember in my private conversations with God, I'm still bedridden. My testimony, there's nothing fake about it. I was bedridden, couldn't walk. And, I'm still thanking God and asking for forgiveness because my biggest fear was dying, and I didn't have any sort of relationship with God. Sure, I was religious, but I didn't even know how to pray at this point, and that changed me to a bit. So when I get better and I get out and start doing testimonies, I'm kind of being told what to do and say, and uh, so on and so on. And I can remember friends saying, "God, forgive me for the sins I sin every day. I'm Generation X. I cuss like a sailor sometimes." And just guide me in the right direction. And the right directions weren't taking me back to this faith-based place that had actually asked me to work for them as well. That they wanted my testimony to be that this place revived, saved my life, and that was honestly just flat out. I think I can cuss once an episode, but that was flat out bullshit. I really got worse after I left that place, and that was by design of a faulty system. And I'll say this out loud. I've said it a lot. You've got people who are in peer support, and all of a sudden, they think they're trained counselors, clinicians, therapists, and they have their place. But honestly, they're giving out these peer supports with 30 days of sober time, which is waiting for a disaster to happen. And there's a lot of people who have come out of the same place I came out of, and they're dead. And in the past few months alone, I know one was a kid who personally meant a lot to me. His name was Chris Lawson. I'll never quit saying his name. Him and I have been talking regularly, and we were talking about getting him on a bus to come back from Dayton, Ohio, to Lexington. And unfortunately, true story. Not unfortunately, I went to my nephew's graduation in North Carolina because I haven't been there for these nephews in the last 10 years, and that's a fact. And I was like, and my sister told me about it. She didn't expect me to come, but I was like, you know what? No, I'll be there. So I drove to Charlotte. I'm still talking to Chris, and I get my days screwed up too. But I believe it was a Saturday was the last time I talked to him. And, he told me he was hungry, and I quote, "Homeless as homeless can be." And I said, "Well, Chris, I'll get you something to eat." And I'm all the way in High Point, North Carolina at this point. And I don't know if it was the same day or the next day, but a friend of mine, Benji, had texted me and said, "Have you heard about Chris?" And I was remember being alone in a hotel room. I told this story on my website earlier this week, but being alone in a hotel room, and I've been sober a while now. I've got years on me, and this is the first time I've really processed true emotions in a purely sober manner, and that to me was. I don't know. As I said on my page, I said I don't know if I was um, mad at myself, mad at the world, if I was mad at Chris for, what's typical is Chris probably, I don't know this for a fact, he probably used one more time, which a lot of us addicts will do before we go into treatment, and that can very easily end up being the last time. Um, it really can, and especially with the unpredictability of fentanyl use and abuse in America today, it's a scary thing. I mean, buying weed off the street is a scary thing, and I'll make my point. I can make it a million times. I'm not a weed smoker. I'm not a marijuana smoker, but I absolutely support the legalization of it because when a lot of people say you've got to pick the lesser of two evils, as a lot of people who voted for Trump in the last election said, um, uh, the lesser of two evils is one, marijuana is not addictive. And some people love to say it is because there have been some junk studies that will say It's addictive. Listen, we can get addicted. I was reading today to looking at the mirror and making sure our beard's perfect. And mine's too long right now. And things like that. But the healing possibilities of a marijuana, magic mushrooms, of an LSD, of an MDMA. I mean, research this yourself. There's a clinical study that's been going on with shrooms um, for a while now. I think 2 years, and you've got a 45% success rate of people right there after a 2 year period now. And you compare that to something like an AA where somebody quits going. AA has a dismal success rate. I mean, it is what it is. Does it have a place? Yes, it does. It has a maintenance place for maintenance with abstinence, but that's it. And people tell me this all the time that I'm so wrong. I don't understand. No, I've been through that program. I get it. I get the 12 steps. I get the pity parties. But it is one of the most enabling experiences in my life because sit there and listen to a story that's so absurd. And somebody's patting you on the back and they understand. And they also say, relapse is a part of recovery. No, it's not. And I mean that. I don't know how many times I relapsed. Goodness sakes, in 2008, I was seriously in a coma because I detoxed so hard from alcohol. And I was in a coma for 3 months. And I came out, felt like I was Superman. I was at AA telling, my story. And, everybody's like, man, you're really a fighter. You're really tough. All that did with me is have me drinking heavier in the long run. And it's because I started to believe my own BS. And, another thing, I'm not hard on friends and family who drink. I'm not that guy who walks into a room and says everybody has a problem. I'm not the guy who says, no, I can't be around alcohol. I can't live life normally. I can't go to Kroger. I can't go to a Meijer. I can't go to a restaurant because guess what? There's people drinking. That's the biggest bunch of nonsense in the world. And I mean that. One of the things in any 12-step model is taking responsibility and accountability. You need to be accountable to your fears and fight your fears and not sit there literally on your ass going, I got to run and hide from this stuff for the rest of my life. Um, you don't. You can fight back. I don't get triggered. I don't have cravings. I don't have fond memories of drinking because I look at it for what it was, and that is a fact that I've said this a million times. I was a bad drinker because for one, and I'm dead serious when I say this, I do not like the taste of alcohol. It gags me every time. It always has, but I will manage or would manage to get that down, and especially in the last 4 months, I was drinking 1.75 of Tito's a day. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's the truth. And I don't know how I drank that much, but I do know that it was a liquid diet, so it was probably giving me enough sugar calories to keep my body moving, but my brain was somewhere way back there. And 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 drinking that much, I don't know to this day. I've talked about therapists with it, and I talked about it with a psychiatrist. I don't know if I was completely suicidal because I knew my health was failing. I knew that I was dying. I mean, I'm getting up in the morning, I'm throwing up blood. I've got gastrointestinal problems. Come to find out later, my stomach was wide open. And I'm filling with blood daily. And uh, when I got to the hospital, and even after I was told I was dying, when I started healing, I still had that thought in the back of my head. Gosh, I'd like to drink all this away, and I didn't. And that's for me to be proud of me and taking accountability. There's nobody that forced me to drink. I didn't grow up in a household of anybody who drank. And, my parents didn't even smoke or do any kind of recreational drugs or anything. But My dad had his problems with being a terrible parent. He was abusive, and I carried that through life, which is hard to even go back on to this day, but it doesn't bother me as much because I've been able to forgive him, forget it, and move on and focus on the now. I'm 2 years later from when I started back at school. I graduated summa cum laude. I've got 33 hours left on my master's, and my job is to assist people in getting better. It's not to. I'm going to use Kentucky slang and say you use a bunch of hogwash and say you work this program. Here's your deal with AA and recovery centers. Difference between recovery centers and rehabs is basically rehabs. You're going to be lucky enough to have more medically trained staff. Um, but anybody can start a recovery center. Anybody can, and it's a wild, wild west. Medicaid has to pay for it. Medicare has to pay for it. Most insurances will pay for it, and that is because it is listed AMA as a disease. So you've got long-term care and everything else. The lobbyists for this were a guy named E.W. Jelinek and AA, and let me see if I can actually, if I've still got that pulled up. I just wrote a paper on this. Yeah, disease theory of E.M. Jelinek. I think I keep saying E.W., but I never get that right. Jelinek effectively promoted the disease theory of alcoholism. He was paid by wealthy alcoholic R. Brinkley Smithers to write the disease concept of alcoholism. It was published in 1960. His theory that alcoholism is a disease is highly controversial among researchers today. He created what was called a Jelinek curve, and it's a man, it's a cluster. There's nothing. It's been long debunked, and listen, the history of this guy is honestly, he is truly that carnival barker salesman. But he was highly respected back then because he made everything up. A Jewish guy who said he graduated from some of the most prestigious schools in Germany during the Nazi era. And it was just, it's a mess. But the man was considered at the time, and I'll just read this, who was a pioneering alcohol researcher. Jelinek was born in 1890 Brooklyn, New York. He was the son of Rosalind Jacobson Jelinek and Evan Marcel Jelinek. His mother was a well-known soprano whose stage name was Marcel Lind. Um, while he was a preschool teacher, the Jelinek family moved to Budapest, Hungary. That's getting boring to me. Um, when Jelinek was in his late 20s, all evidence indicates that he was engaged in illegal currency transactions. He was accused of embezzling 500,000 Hungarian crowns. That equated to about 3 million in 1920 US dollars. It would be about 35 billion in today's dollars. Wow. In June 28th, 1920, a warrant for his arrest was published in both Hungary and foreign newspapers. Jelinek vanished. Um, uh, According to the family and friends, they only heard from him 5 years later when he was living in Sierra Leone, which is a part of West Africa, presumably to avoid arrest. He then moved to Honduras, conducted banana research for the United Fruit Company, was fired from that job. In 1930, the statute of limitations had ran out for his criminal charges, and he returned to the U.S. Had been working on at Worcester State Hospital. He later directed the Yale Summer School of Alcohol Studies until 1939. For a period, he worked for the World Health Organization. He was working on a project at the Institute for Study of Human Problems when he died suddenly in 1963. There's complete uncertainty about his academic background because there's no proof. His alleged degrees right here. There is a consensus among those who have investigated the matter that Jelinek was self-reported in his degrees and are almost complete and certain fabrications. He reported of a degree from a university that had expelled him for non-attendance. He, a Jew, reported receiving a doctorate from a Nazi university. I mean, that's pushing it. I don't know how else to say that, but that's pushing it. Um, in addition, there were gratuitous fibs. For example, he said his nickname meant little radish in Hungarian, and in fact, the Hungarian word for radish is ratek, and the list goes on. I mean, he was a known liar and fraud, and that's all there goes down to it. And there's more to this. I can pull up a paper of mine. But even though a lot of doctors will not consider alcoholism as a disease, they still support it being a disease, and for obvious economic reasons, um, which only makes sense. I mean, it's insurance right there. And listen, um, I, where I went to earlier, and I said anybody can start a rehab or recovery center, and that's the truth, you know. And a lot of them, and I've studied a lot of them now. I've moved away from that junky ass place I was at in Nicholasville, Kentucky, named Revive, and I mean, just awful there. But let me get into it. The American Medical Association has actually made clear in its admittance of economic interest and promoting alcoholism as a disease. These and other resources show this. For instance, the AMA endorses the proposition of drug dependencies, including alcoholism, are diseases, and their treatment is part of legitimate medical practice. Also, the AMA encourages insurance companies and prepayment plans to remove unrealistic limitations on the extent of coverage afforded to the treatment of alcoholism. Recognizing that alcoholism is a chronic illness and that multiple hospital admissions under medical supervision may be essential to arresting the progress of this disease, um, most rehabs except Medicaid and Medicare, who as an insurer has to weigh out so many facts. And this is quote me. Uh, the fact addiction is considered a disease by the AMA, rehab is less costly than hospitalization. I should have said recovery right there. And in a worst case scenario, hospice care is way more expensive than most rehabs. Um, there's more bias. This is where I actually admit my bias when I do my research papers. As I've learned, the deeper I get in, okay, deeper I get into it, and that being the reason it's currently considered a disease when only 12% of doctors in a nationwide survey in America consider it one. And that was from alcohol.org. In terms of my own biases, good low, the failures pushed me to look for fruitful answers as I move forward in my chosen path. For my chosen profession, without critical analysis, skill development, I myself would remain stagnant. The study of wellness itself within mental health and addiction is key to progression and one of the largest killers in the U.S. And this was another, I mean, it's a long paper, but it was also another, uh, I got 100 on it. And that's not the point. It's because, you know, I do my research. And, back in the day, I would have been, I guess there's a lot of people who say degrees don't make a person, don't mean anything. Man, that's just so wrong in so many ways, and I dare the people who say that to go ahead and sit and have to go through the research that I have to go through, and that many others have had to go through to get that piece of paper, as it's so often called. And it's not a joke. You have to learn. The ins and outs. And man, when I look around, especially in the theories of personality disorders, and I think back in my own life, I often use myself as a case study, especially with my many years in addiction. I mean, I don't think I could tell myself the truth, and nonetheless be, honest and open with friends and everything else. And, when you have what they diagnosed me with was chronic PTSD or CPTSD, and that's okay. I went through uh, enough therapy. I went through a full program with it, and that's part of why I don't blame anybody or anything else when it comes to drinking. It is you have a choice to get better, and every addiction is different. I am going to say that. I'm not. I've never been a shooter. I didn't really do hard drugs. I barely smoked marijuana in my life. Um, but again, it's a case by case study, and if the legalities of it weren't so lax, where I said that anybody that's breathing can start a recovery center, seriously, and they can bill Medicaid for ridiculous amounts. I mean, I know in my last recovery when I was reading over the paperwork, because I had to explain it, is I was labeled disabled for a good year, 2 years, I can't remember, just because, I mean, my health was shot and I was listed as terminal. But in looking back through my paperwork, I mean, they had billed me for Klonopin addiction, treatment for that, and I've never had an issue with Klonopin. I still don't have an issue. I've used it in the past for panic attacks. I still have a prescription for it. I think I get 30 a month at point fives. I'm open and honest about it. I really don't use them. Um, just I don't. I use them PRN, which is basically per needed, and I don't really get upset about much anymore because I've developed uh, really good emotional intelligence skills, and including self awareness and self care. And little things like I started. I've mentioned this before. I started, building adult Legos when I was pissed off. I've learned how to play the guitar again. Um, and I mean, there's just so much more to it than that. Meditation is a surefire good look for most people. Um, well, for a lot of people, I know it works for me, which is, you know, I was so stubborn. That stuff that years ago I would have said was like hoodoo voodoo, but I don't believe that anymore at all. And it's a matter of what one of the main principles in that AAMS is, and it's take. Sorry, I play with my hair too much. I'm just not used to it being long, so I'm always like get behind my ears. And accountability and responsibility to yourself and to your loved ones to not sit there and do that. And I'm sure anybody that listens to my stuff has been to a 12-step group or meeting. And uh, the pity party, and the best I learned it was from this old man a long time ago. And, he just hit 43 years sober. And he doesn't count the years he doesn't do AA. He said the best thing he ever did was quit going to AA. And by the way, the success rate for people getting sober on their own is factually and actually higher than the success rate of somebody going through a recovery center and or a 12-step program. And I mean, that's just the facts. You look at a 5 to 7% in this year's stats of success through 12-step AA. And this is from a 40-year Cochrane Institute study. You know, AA, when they do their statistical analysis and put out their numbers, they use a self-reporting system, and they use people who are obviously have been there for you know 10 years, maybe a year. I don't know, but those who keep going, and that's something that, I found it to be, in the end, I found it to be such an intolerable experience of the things people were saying, because I could say in the last 4 months, and I could bring receipts with me and show that, I spent 40 grand on a hotel room, staying drunk, and I think trying to kill myself. But and going back to that, and people do like to argue me because, hey, I'm just the idiot that is busting my ass to get answers on it. But I could literally say that I drank 1.75 of Tito's vodka a day. First of all, if I say Tito's vodka, that's going to get me in trouble because that's what they call a trigger. But beyond that, man, let's get realistic. I could say I drank 1.75, and I kid you not, across the room within a couple of minutes, somebody will say, "Oh, that's nothing. I drank 2 of those, and then I drank a 24 pack of, let's see, Coors something, whatever." And then somebody else would go, that's nothing. I drank 4 of those, got a keg on the way home, and had that drunk by the time I got home and then went out to the bar. I mean, it becomes more or less, for lack of a better word, the term, it becomes a pissing contest. And that's frustrating. It's not taking accountability. It means you're still there. And you can, and this is not the AA version. AA actually coined the drive drunk term, and that's for people who didn't attend meetings regularly enough for the powers that be. And please understand, the powers that be in a AA situation are generally untrained and unlicensed therapists who are supposed to keep time how long somebody's talking and collect the money for the self-sustaining organization. And but again, I want to end this way. There is a place for AA for somebody that doesn't care to stay stagnant, for somebody that's just looking for abstinence, and somebody that's not looking to heal. There's a place for AA for people to stay sober. Is it better than somebody else staying drunk on the streets, or getting trashed and beating their wife and or their kids, or beating their health to death? Yes, absolutely. There is a place for AA, and in that same breath, there's a place for recovery centers. But I'll be damned. The next time I know Revive in Nicholasville, you got to understand, I have huge issues with that place because to me it's like a death factory to a point. Gets people upset. My friends and family that love me are convinced that one of the people that runs that place is going to come and kill me. So if anything happens to me, it was that damn recovery center. Well, it's not. No, it's not good there. That's just, it's a whatever. It's this Wild West thing that it's a gold rush to own a recovery center, and then you've got some real people out there. My friend David Eggers from Lexington Catholic. First of all, I never thought David was going to be a sober person. I'm not going to put what he was into, but Dave's sobriety's led him into a world of, because he's a realist, man. He's a deadhead, and it's led him into a world where now he has 3 sober houses on campus in Lexington. They're approved for intensive outpatient treatment. His significant other, the lady who's running it with him, she has a background as a nurse anesthetist, which is a really hell of a hard program. And the way they've set up is it's brilliant, it's fruitful, and those are things that'll work. And I'm following along behind Dave. I'm still about a year behind him. I can start counseling in April of next year, and go from there. But I'm very some people say opinionated. I would say I used to be opinionated, but now I'm very fact based on things. And I don't like to hear rhetoric. I don't want to hear the arguments um, about my harshness on the 12-step programs and things like that, because I'm telling you, that's a free program that people are able to open a recovery center, use that same program, don't differentiate from it. And they're getting a free program. And think about this in terms of economics. So they've got this free program. What's their overhead? Maybe the rent on the place, if there is rent, the electric bills, the food, which most of it, the last place I was at, gets donated. A lot of it gets donated, and they still make everybody that goes in there get a SNAP benefits card, which they use to save my food. I sell them at a Kroger for all I know. But with all that said, it's if you look at it as a business plan, I've got a built-in free program that I can add to. And now, listen, a lot of them add to it by saying they're faith-based, and all you're going to get out of that is a bunch of jackals that are saying praise Jesus, going out and doing the same stuff just another day, but in hiding behind that praise Jesus. And I will tell you, I've told a million people this, and I learned this at Lexington Catholic when I was a kid, that if you're taking the Lord's name in vain, it's not the person who's saying GD, it's the person who's fraudulently using Christ as prophet for themselves. I mean, and I can tell you, I can't stand Joel Osteen. I didn't like Timothy Faye Baker. And the list just, it would go on forever, and that's me going down a rabbit hole. So, but it was good to be back. I'm really so tied up in studies. It's crazy. I hope to do another one next week if I can. If I can't, I'll pull up one of my ones from when I was like, no kidding. I mean, when I got home, I was 5'10". I was 115 pounds. What a difference. I'm 185 as of yesterday. So, a little bit healthier, and I give all that credit to Macho. I'm sorry, but if y'all haven't listened to Macho Man interviews from the 80s on YouTube, I think I can laugh for a good hour. If I was in a bad man, that's coach. You'll listen to the old wrestling promos from the 80s and early 90s. It's too much, but it's funny. But listen, much love to everybody. I try and get my point across. If I don't, trust me, I'm using it with an educated mind and not using assumptions anymore. And that's one of the part of wellness and critical thinking, which it is my job moving forward to question everything. And I got into this. I didn't want to go back to school 40 something. I got into this to get answers as to what happened to me. And that's what I've searched for. And fortunately, that's blossomed out into, okay, there's other ways to assist people in this process and what they're going through. And, it's pretty cool. Like I said, I would never have thought I would have so many shade tree sobriety coach experts and stuff who question maybe my demeanor. I'll tell you, most people think I'm an arrogant asshole because I really don't hold back, and I'll just say what I mean as evidence. I went confronted a pastor in a church in Nicholasville, Kentucky, who's spreading false narrative for profit. And honestly, this is the type of stuff that can kill somebody. Please look at it this way, and especially when I talk about my deal with the legalization of marijuana is if pot's FDA controlled, you're not going to have the possibility of it having a fentanyl sprinkling in it, which I do know of people who have died from smoking a joint. Um, and that wasn't what they thought was going to happen. And that's scary, man, to me. And I get asked all the time when I talk about this story, why would somebody spray fentanyl in a bag of pot? Well, 2 grams of fentanyl can kill you, first of all. And kudos to the Nicholasville police, as they just gathered up half a pound in there, which is thing, that could kill 133 um, thousand people, I believe. It was 226 grams. So yeah. I mean, I'm on board with that. But when they sprinkle it, the reason being is all I can figure. And somebody tell me if they think I'm wrong. But I would think business is business, man, and go back to that old formula. And people are going to go to pot sales or word of mouth. You know, Jimmy John's got the best pot down, man. I'm telling you, but that could be laced with fentanyl and can potentially be deadly. I never, when I got into this stuff, I never thought I'd be telling a story about a kid dying from smoking a joint. But that is life, and I will see you all next week. Possibly, we got to work out some things and start doing this on a more professional level the closer I get to being licensed and all that stuff. From what I understand, I need to start watching my mouth, but that's up in the air. So everybody have a good day, have a good night. I do love y'all. If anybody needs any help, the ticker at the bottom says on this one, it's facebook.com /goodloe.napier. But my name is Goodloe, Goodloe, and you can type that into Google or anything on my Facebook pages. But if you got something need, or if you have some questions about, what's going on with you, I wish I would have had somebody to answer me open questions who wouldn't BS me. About everything, and especially you're always going to get people who go, "You keep going this way, you're going to die." Tell me something I didn't know. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. Yes, it can kill you. Keep using stuff that's bad for your body. I mean, cigarettes. You can actually overdose and die on water. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks for those who tuned in. I don't ever look at comments till later because honestly, if there's a rabbit hole to be found, so then I get real strong my hairs on it. If there's a rabbit hole to jump in, I'll fall down and take it with me for a while. It's pretty fun. So, all right, much love to all, and I will see everybody again next week. Good night.